Yo, what is good, people? Ben from Love of Tech, and we are back with another camera comparison. Z Fold 4 versus the iPhone 13 Pro. Pretty much seeing what the best Apple has against what Samsung's foldables now have with their camera upgrades. We're going to test photos, videos, daylight and low light, and pretty much go through it. So sit back, relax. It's going to be a good one. Just a quick breakdown of the camera hardware specs on both these phones, and start with the Z Fold 4. You do have a 12 megapixel ultra wide, a 50 megapixel main sensor, and a 3x optical zoom at 10 megapixels with the 10 megapixel selfie on the cover display. With the iPhone, you do have a triple 12 megapixel setup for the ultra wide, wide, and 3x zoom with a 12 megapixel selfie on the camera at the front. A quick reminder that the best way to watch this camera comparison is with headphones or earphones on the largest display possible at the highest resolution in 4K. With that out of the way, let's get back into the main camera comparison. We are now starting in 4K UHD, 60 frames per second on the selfie camera, seeing how the colors, stabilization and dynamic range is like. Quick run. Now we're in 4K 30 frames per second on the selfie camera on both. Seeing how they perform. Quick run. Quick showcase of 1080p 30 frames per second on the selfie camera on both the iPhone 13 Pro and the Z Fold 4. We are in the video portrait mode for both these devices. Cinematic mode, video portrait mode, and seeing how they both work. We are now in the rear camera, shooting in 4K UHD 30 frames per second on both. And just seeing how the image quality, stabilization, dynamic range and the colors look like. Quick run. Switch into the ultra wide. Quick run. To the 3x zoom. 3x zoom here. Back to the main. Here is the advantage Samsung has. When you're recording in 4K 30 frames a second, you can switch to the selfie without stopping the recording. This is something you still can't do on an iPhone, and still offers the most seamless experience recording video on a Samsung device. Switching over now to 4K UHD 60 frames per second on a main sensor. Quick run. That is all digital zoom on a main sensor. We've now switched to 4K UHD 60 frames per second on the ultra wide on the iPhone. This is something you cannot do on the Z Fold 4 at the time of this recording. You still do have to pause it to switch to the ultra wide. It's not as seamless as in 4K 30 frames per second, but you can record on the ultra wide nonetheless on the iPhone. Quick run. We're now showcasing 4K UHD 60 frames per second on the 3x optical zoom on both. Again, you do have to pause it so you can switch into the optical zoom lens, or else it does a digital zoom on the main camera. You still do get a slightly more seamless experience on the Fold 4. Although you can't switch to the other rear lenses, you can switch to the selfie even when you're recording 4K UHD 60 frames a second. We've now switched over to 4K UHD 30 frames a second on the rear camera, just with being the subject to see how it behaves in terms of colors and stabilization and image quality. We've now switched over to the ultra wide angle camera lens, still in 4K UHD 30 frames a second, to see the image quality with me as a subject. And we are in 4K UHD 60 frames a second on the main camera lens, just seeing the image quality difference with me as a subject. We are now testing the video portrait mode on the rear cameras. Again, cinematic on the iPhone, video portrait mode on the Z Fold 4, and seeing how they behave with me in the subject. Limit to 1080p 30 frames a second. So we are in 4K UHD 30 frames a second on the rear camera for the iPhone 13 Pro and the Z Fold 4. Switch it to the ultra wide. For 4K UHD 30 frames a second on the selfie camera. Let's start things off with the daytime images with the rear camera taking some landscape shots. Starting with the ultra wide, the iPhone does have slightly more field of view when it comes to the ultra wide. Overall more detail, and it tends to have actually a more flatter look. The Z Fold 4 does have a softer image with a more warmer look and more vibrant image as well. Moving to the main wide sensor, the Z Fold 4 definitely now has more detail and a sharper image compared to the iPhone, but everything else remains the same as before in terms of the colors and dynamic range. In the 3x zoom, although the Fold 4 keeps the more vibrant look, I actually do prefer the overall look of the iPhone. With the close-up shot of the flower, there is a more intense natural blur on the Fold 4 thanks to the larger sensor, and you can get a bit closer. But thanks to the autofocus available on the ultra wide, the iPhone does have a dedicated macro mode, which is something that is lacking on the Fold 4. The biggest advantage is far into the extended zoom ranges at 10x and 30x, which the Fold 4 does a lot better as the iPhone is limited to 15x. I remember the time we spent together. Overall, selfie performance is definitely in favor of the Z Fold 4, even when you move over to portrait mode. From the colors to the blur and edge detection, which is still decent and good on the iPhone, but the skin tones on the Fold 4 are far better, with the iPhone giving me an overly dark look and a flat look to my jumper. These last set of daytime photos with the rear cameras with me as the subjects, starting with the ultra wide, I definitely prefer the look of the Fold 4. Now you could say that iPhone has a much more natural look, but personally the colors are too flat and off. Same results show when moving to the main wide sensor with improved detail on both phones. Same again goes for the portrait mode images, and in the 1x mode the blur is more intense on the iPhone for a more dramatic look, but overall I think the colors are better on the Fold 4 and it takes it here for me. And this translates again to the 3x zoom mode for portrait mode. Let's move over to low light images and starting with the landscape shots. As much as using the ultra wide is a struggle on both, the iPhone definitely produces the better image with more detail and less color shift. Things do even out when moving to the wide sensor with good detail on both, but I do prefer the overall look of the iPhone and how it maintains an even and consistent look when it comes to the colors. In this particular situation as well in low light, the 3x zoom also looks cleaner on the iPhone. Without night mode, performance on the ultra wide is non-existent on both. Main wide sensor works best on both with a slightly brighter image on the iPhone. Night mode is always the difference maker, and with night mode on the ultra wide, it performs better on the iPhone, and in fact with night mode, the iPhone allows a maximum time option beyond the auto mode for an even cleaner look. Night mode on the main sensor does look overall better on the Fold 4, even when using a max time exposure on the iPhone. Low light selfie was an interesting turn of events. In the standard mode, the iPhone is brighter, but again, still not usable. Night mode selfie is also brighter on the iPhone, with the Z Fold 4 going for a much more even exposure and a warmer look that better represents nighttime, so I reckon I actually prefer it. With the front screen flash, this feels the same as the results found on night mode between both phones. Now trying to replicate the same for low light portrait mode, for some reason I just could not get an option for night mode on the iPhone for portrait mode. This worked no issue, as you can see on the Fold 4. Front screen flash with portrait mode worked fine on both. Last set of low light photos with the rear cameras with me as the subject. The ultra wide on the iPhone this time is way more noisy and muddy when it comes to the looks, while the Fold 4 is cleaner overall. Moving over to the main wide sensor, the Z Fold 4 takes this one with a cleaner, more detailed image with good colors across the board. Portrait mode works great on both in low light, with the iPhone having a more intense blur. But the advantage again with the Z Fold 4 is that you can use night mode and portrait mode together, which although it did look like the option was showing this time on the iPhone, after trying multiple times, I just could not get it to work. This might be a conflict with using it with the timer, as I was shooting these by myself, but again, it worked on the Fold, but not on the iPhone. Let's now summarize the video performance, and with the daytime selfie video, not by a large amount, but in my opinion, the overall detail and clarity is better on the iPhone. The problem and catch with the iPhone selfie video is that once you record in 4K UHD 60 frames a second, there is a huge drop in dynamic range with the highlights all blown out, which does not happen on the Z Fold 4. The Fold 4 has a more vibrant, warmer look with both having great video stabilization. In the default blur mode for the video portrait mode, I do prefer the look of the Z Fold 4. One advantage you have with the iPhone is that you can change the video blur intensity after you finish recording in the iPhone's photo software, which is something, to my knowledge, and after testing and looking, you can't do on the Z Fold 4. For the rear video, there are some things to take into account. I would say the overall video performance in terms of clarity, detail, and looks is better on the iPhone, and this has been consistently a strong area for Apple, no doubt, and it's still overall something that still holds true. There is one intangible thing Samsung still does better when it comes to video, is that it gives a much more seamless video recording experience, especially when recording up to 4K 30 frames a second. Not only can you switch between all three lenses at the back, but you can also switch to the selfie camera without stopping the recording, and also pause and play while still continuously recording on the same clip. Although not demoed in this camera comparison, you do also now have the option for 8K 24 frames a second on the Z Fold 4. One major downside is that the Fold 4 cannot, at the time of this recording, record in 4K 60 frames a second on the ultra wide, which is something you can easily do on the iPhone. When placing myself in the frame as the subject, the iPhone just takes it again, thanks to better overall detail, clarity, colors produced with solid video stabilization on both phones. With nighttime video, it is always recommended to use the main wide sensor for the best results. In this case, it does look like the Fold 4 has a slightly brighter look. Same goes for selfie videos as well. With audio performance, both are nice, loud and clear, but there does seem to be a bit more background noise reduction on the Fold 4 compared to the iPhone. That is it with this ultimate camera comparison between the Z Fold 4 and the iPhone 13 Pro. Let me know your thoughts of it in the comment section below. That's it for me, Ben from Lover of Tech. If you enjoy videos like this, you know exactly what to do. Hit that like button,
hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS, the Tech Lover Squad, so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. I hope you're all safe during this time. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.